Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, How My Dad Dealt with Student Neighbors Who Parked in Our Yard. This dates back to 1992 when I lived with my parents in a university town. We used to have students live next door and a little downhill from us, and they'd continually park their cars inside our property near a dodgy fence between our properties. Their place was full of junk and only had one accessible driveway where one of the longer-term students would always park. Dad was a lawn-proud man, and while he was incredibly patient with these guys, and would ask them repeatedly to move their cars, he hit breaking point one weekend. There was a big race in town. Half a dozen visiting student guest shitty cars ended up in our lawn, and he went around to protest, saying it had gone beyond ridiculous, especially in wet weather when it'd be likely to damage his lawn all the more. They promised like they always did that they'd get the cars out and not park there ever again, but hey, the race was on, they all wanted to watch it and have a decent Sunday, and they'd leave them there until the race was over. As I mentioned, our backyard was uphill from theirs, and part way through the race it really started bucketing down. Dad didn't show any outward anger, but he went into town, came back with a few bottles of dishwashing liquid, and coated the whole lawn in the stuff. Come evening, some of the guys needed to move their cars, and when they got to the downhill slope to go out our driveway, found they couldn't steer or brake. Two made it out without much damage, but the third slid sideways, got onto the steeper part of the lawn and went straight through the fence and into one of the other students' cars and pushed it sideways into the house. Total damage? 4 student cars with dents, one with busted front suspension, one wall of the student rental totaled, a bunch of arrogant students kicked out, and a few skid marks on Dad's lawn. Total cost to my dad? $4 in dishwashing liquid, a few weeks lawn regrowth, and a brand new fence shared with the new neighbors, who were pretty decent people. Dad's response to the police asking about the frothy crap on the lawn? White oil. Kills bugs. The next one is titled, Wasted a Scammer's Afternoon and Gas Money Using a Fake Facebook Account for Insulting Me Weeks Earlier. Back in September I went to look at a pair of moose antlers on Facebook Marketplace that my dad was interested in. He lives in a small cabin on my property and thought the antlers would look cool over his front door. We get there, and the dude is clearly high on coke. Jittery, keeps wiping his nose, etc. We met him at a storage rental place, so he had to let us in with his code, and we were stuck in the facility until he let us back out. We get to his rental unit and he gets the antlers out. They were very clearly fake. He'd said he'd spray painted them brown to make them look like they were still in velvet. It was obvious he'd sprayed them to try to make them look real. The weight was off, the color was off, there were several large cracks in them, and you could see they were white inside, not bone colored. There were also several points broken off, and the material inside was white and powdery, again, not bone. He kept insisting they could be fixed with some epoxy. Finally, tapping your fingers on them made a drum noise, so they were hollow inside. At this point, I hadn't said a word at all. I was just along for the ride with my dad. Dad politely tells the guy that we're going to pass, he thinks they are fake, thanks but no thanks. This guy goes off the deep end, screaming at us, calling us all sorts of names, insulting us, our mothers, etc. Then he starts screaming at us that we were locked in there with him and weren't leaving until he was ready to go. Dad and I get in the truck, and luckily another customer was coming into their unit and we were able to get out of the locked gate when they came in. We both thought it was hilarious, how off the wall this guy acted and how fake the antlers looked in person. I stew on this for a few weeks and finally come up with a revenge plan. I didn't say a single word to the guy, and he insulted my entire family tree, wife, intelligence, etc. I create a new Facebook account with the dumbest old person name I could come up with. Then, I use a bunch of Hide the Pain Harold photos to populate it with. Then start adding as many friends as I can, posting dumb crap about old black and white movies, my prostate, etc. Spent a few days crap loading this account as much as I could. Then, once the account was 2 weeks old and I could get on Facebook groups, I go to a few of the groups I knew this guy was on and find some of his items he had for sale. Luckily, he had 2 large bookcases for sale. Great, something big and awkward to move around. Next, I do some research and find the most pain in the butt location in my city to get to. I pick a place that has no highway on-ramps, so it takes at least half an hour to get to it off the highway. I message him, and I ask if he would deliver since I only have a sedan. And he says yes. For $50 to cover his gas and a helper because they would take 2 people to move around. We set up a date and time, and I tell him I'm going to meet him at a nearby grocery store, since my house is hard to find. Finally, the time arrives. He messages me that he is at the grocery store. Now I come up with every annoying old person slow thing I can think of. I'm putting my shoes on. My wife is in the shower and I can't leave in case she slips. Then, oh, we've not gone anywhere in so long because of this China virus. My car battery is dead. Mr. Scammer finally asks for my address and says he will find the place. I get on Google Maps and find the most pain in the butt street to get to, knowing he's driving a full-size van and towing a trailer with the bookshelves. So I find a street in the very center of our old badly laid out neighborhood, got on Street View, and look for where the house numbers stop, and pick a number a few above that one. I test it in Google Maps, and Google Maps isn't smart enough to know that house number doesn't exist. It just points you at the end of the dead-end street. So I relay this address. Of course I make sure to mess it up a few times and get him lost in the process. After about 90 minutes he messages that he can't find that house number but he's on my street, can I please come outside? I reply back with, no thanks. Him, no thanks, what? Me, I walked out there and saw them, not interested in buying. My Facebook account blows up for the next hour with him trying to call me, video chat, sending all kinds of horrible messages about how I'm a liar and a cheater. I never respond back. I check it occasionally and about every 2 weeks he sends me a nasty message still. Dude had no idea who it was that messed with him, or why it happened. I'm kind of debating about doing it again. The next one is titled, Ruined a Shitty Housemate's Life. So I moved into a 4-bedroom uni house. I knew 2 of my housemates, let's call them Abby and Ben. Due to unfortunate circumstances our previously planned housemate didn't live with us, so we found a new one, Chloe. Chloe is a horrible housemate. This becomes apparent when she never pays any bills or rent on time, smokes like a chimney inside, against our agreement, leaves home for a few days leaving a big pile of washing up for us to do, including our pots and pans, scream gaming on her laptop all the way till 5 AM, walls are thin. Just to name a few things. Basically they suck. So it gets till about 4 months in, we cannot stand her. So have a house meeting. Basically we sit there and try to explain how we would prefer she don't scream at her laptop, I assume gaming, until 5 AM every night as all of us get up early. Everything we bring up she denied it. We have each lent her a month's rent and bills too and she hasn't paid any of us back, over $1,000 between us. She denied it saying she doesn't owe us. This point we are all pretty upset. Then a few weeks later was a Saturday night, and being students Abby and Ben and me invited friends round for pre-drinks. We asked Chloe first but she said she would be out so that's fine. Turns out she finished work early so she came home and was shocked to find people there, went up to her room. She kept coming down and turning the music down, it wasn't even loud in the first place. She got so angry. He threw my speaker out the window. I didn't see her do it but loads of people told me so. I'd had enough, I went to go get my speaker, she came with me to my surprise. And as she left in full viability of me keyed my car parked on the driveway. I got up with my speaker and shouting at her as she walked off. Luckily we have an automatic light on the side of the house and a car was driving down my road at the time. The driver said he had a dash cam and probably caught it out the window to me. I stopped shouting in disbelief and gave him my email address. Went about my night enjoying the party. When it was time to leave a lot of us hadn't finished our alcohol so left it on the kitchen table and left. When we got back the next day and had sobered up in the morning we found all the alcohol had been taken, along with the speaker, some headphones and my laptop. Now I was really upset. The revenge, I logged into my housemate's laptop on my email. This guy had pulled through, sent me a small clip of her keying the car along with several close-up stills showing the key in contact. I first confronted Chloe asking if she knew where my stuff was, while Abby and Ben secretly recorded on their phones. Things got heated and she looked like she was going to fight me. I am big guy, 6'4", and I'm really not scared. I am basically just upset out of pure frustration. Chloe then swung her fists at me a few times, making contact. I didn't fight back. I put my hands and arms over my head and face. She then stomps off thinking she won. Let me remind you, Abby and Ben were recording. I call the police. They show up. I basically say I have good reason to believe Chloe stole my alcohol and other possessions. They go up and knock on her door. She tells them to go away. They can't go in without a search warrant. I file a report about assault, and the things stolen relating the two. The police are very nice and basically tell me how to fill it in. They come back the next day with warrant for her arrest for assault and battery. They then search her room and find all the stolen alcohol bottles, my headphones which clearly were mine as they only paired with my phone, and my laptop and damaged speaker. I sued her. And won. I had indisputable evidence along with witnesses for all the events. I got Tilda $3,000 for car, speaker and rent she owed us. And an additional $5,000. She went to prison for resisting arrest, assaulting a police officer, assault, destruction of property, theft and battery. She still had to pay rent for her room, which we used as a gym. The next one is titled, I froze my psycho neighbor out of her apartment. In college, my two friends and I decided to find a place together off campus. We found a beautiful 3-bedroom house with surprisingly affordable rent. The basement of the house was listed as a separate apartment, but as it had a separate entrance and the indoor stairwell had been blocked off, we weren't worried. And the thermostat was upstairs. Then the demon neighbor moved in. From upstairs, we could hear everything. This adult woman would call her mother and scream at her to pay for her cell phone bills and give her grocery money, as known as Taco Bell and cheap tequila. She would scream at whatever guy she was sleeping with to bring her meth, and one day, she brought home 3 puppies to scream at, too. We were terrified of this woman, and the noise was hell. Also, we'd been idiotic enough to sign a lease stating we were responsible for all utilities, period, meaning we were now financing her gas, water, and electric. But with only 2 months left on the lease, we thought we could just ride it out. But then she started smoking. Constantly. According to the landlord, she'd quit for good when she'd signed the lease, but for good only lasted 2 days. Since it was winter, the heat was running nearly 24/7, and the smoke was wafting up from the vents. Our apartment and all our belongings began to reek with smoke. We contacted the landlord, because we'd signed for a bloody non-smoking apartment. He told us we lived in a state where you could technically call an apartment non-smoking even if it shared ventilation with a smoking apartment. Duck you, leasing laws. At this point, my 2 roommates were heading out for a 2-week vacation. They were online students, while I was residential, leaving me alone in the apartment with the demon smoker in the basement. I couldn't sleep or eat, because my idiotic stomach decided to react to all the second-hand smoke by aching and cramping constantly. After 3 days, I was a little insane. I made a plan. I checked the forecast, lows in the 20s all week. I borrowed a friend's ultra-insulated sleeping bag. I bought one of those ski masks with the holes for your eyes and mouth. I got out my stocking cap, my silk long underwear, my woolen socks, and my down parka. I bought tea, hot cocoa, and ramen, and prepared to live off a diet of hot liquids. And I turned off the ducking heat. Day 1, she's screaming at her mother for forcing her to move into this frozen hole of an apartment. Day 2, she's screaming at her boyfriend, meth dealer, because he won't let her move in with him. Day 3, she's screaming at the landlord about how she's ducking freezing. Day 4, the landlord is at my door. I greet him in full ski mask, parka, stocking cabaret, looking like I'm heading out to rob Santa Claus at the North Pole. He asks me if I don't find it a little chilly in the house. I reply I'd found all the cigarette smoke a little warm. Day 5, she's screaming about the witches upstairs to anyone who will listen, and I'm sitting upstairs clutching my car keys and my pepper spray with 911 typed into my phone. She finally decides she's ducking leaving and moving in with Greg, even though he just got out for stabbing Travis, and he lives in that ducking creepy house in the woods with all those hole-biting dogs. Day 6, she's gone. I silently bless Greg. Moral of the story, there's a bloody reason the rent seems too good to be true. P.S. For those wondering, I did have a friend who worked plumbing stop by to give me some advice about how low I could go before I burst the water pipes to hell and back. The last one is entitled Neighbor Threatens Dogs and I Break. Years ago, my mother and I had just moved to a new dog-friendly apartment complex. We had 2 dogs, one was a Bichon Shih Tzu and the other is a Terrier Poodle mix. Because of them, we were excited for the community dog park right next to our building. Also to note, our whole building was filled with dog owners, each with dogs ranging from small to huge. Our apartment was on the first floor in the back of the building, all the way in the corner. It was a nice private area for us with how the apartments were situated. Since one of our dogs is a terrier, he can be a bit barky when we are not home. Though when we are home we have a clicker to get his attention, which he has been trained to stop barking and come to whoever has the clicker. Due to our work hours I was usually home in the morning and Mum was home in the afternoon, leaving him alone for a few hours during the day. After a month of moving to our new apartment, we received a note on our door. It was from one of our neighbors. It stated, "Dear neighbor, I understand that you are new to this complex, but it is rude to allow your dog to bark. It is ruining my sleep before I go to work, and my job is extremely important. I don't care how you do it, but shut your dog up." My mum turned in the note right away to the leasing office as she wasn't sure what to do with it. That is when the office told us not to worry because he had done this to every dog owner in the building. They did ask us to see if we can find ways to calm him down when we were not home. So we did. We found out the kids of the neighborhood liked playing with the power station outside our apartment and that is who he had been barking at. So we closed off that area for him when we went out and no one was home. We started playing calming music as a way to help as well. Another week goes by and this time we hear a knock at the door. We go outside, and we meet our angry neighbor. He explains that our dog has kept him up every day and woke him up with his hours of barking. Both of us had been home that day, and our dog had been a good boy and had not had excessive barking. I still remember what he had told us when I explained that. I know what I heard. If you can't control your dog, then I am going to call animal control and have them both taken from you. I did it before and have no problem getting rid of your dogs too. Then I'll get you kicked out for not following your lease, and I can do that because I am very rich and the apartment needs my money. So do something to shut your dogs up or else. After that and my mum apologizing for what had happened, we went back in. A few moments later, I walked out to get the mail and discovered from another neighbor that he had gone to 3 other apartments and made similar threats. After some convincing, my mum told the apartment what had happened. We were told not to worry, and if he did that again to please contact them. We also found out that the apartment had offered him an apartment away from the dogs, but he had declined since the dogs were the problem and not him. However, what he had done, my mum began to show signs of anxiety and bought a lemon spray bark collar for our dog. While I didn't like this idea, it had put her at ease to go outside our apartment. We did make sure to only put it on him when we both were not home. A month went by peacefully, then once again we get a knock on our door. This time it was animal control. They had gotten an anonymous report of a dog being abused and neglected in our home. They explained that someone has said that our dogs were barking because of neglect. My mum invited the AC lady inside and explained the situation. We showed her everything we could to prevent our dogs from being taken away. The nice lady noticed how playful and happy our dogs were and figured it was another false call. She explained that they had gotten a few of those from an anonymous concerned neighbor for other apartments in this building. The AC lady left, telling us that if they are threatened again to try and get it on record. This event had turned my mum into a paranoid person who became afraid to leave the house, thinking that if she did, then she would lose her pups. Normally I am the calmest person in my family, never really letting anyone get to me, but this neighbor did this to hurt us. So I did my research and discovered a few things that could legally help us. With new information on certain laws and leasing terms, I formed a plan. During a weekend that my mum was visiting my aunt in a different state, I began my plan. I started it by printing out a few things and then sat outside with my phone and a speaker. I began to play a video of a dog barking really loud. I had figured out which apartment was his thanks to a few neighbors who also were tired of being harassed. I sat there looking across the courtyard to where his apartment was. I waited with a huge smile on my face, and as I hoped for, he stormed out and headed over to where I was. I turned off my video and turned on my recorder without him noticing. His face is red with anger as he looks at me sitting there with a smile. "I'm sorry, can I help you?" I ask him. "Duck you. I ducking told you what I will do to your family if you ducking didn't stop your mutt from ruining my sleep. Now, I'm going to get 'em taken from you and get you kicked out for not doing as I said. I gave you a ducking chance. I hope when they take your dogs that they are killed and you and your mum live inside a cardboard box." I give him a fake "oh dear" look and say, "So you are saying that I am not allowed to make loud noises including my dogs barking between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m? And that I went against the law by doing so? You know you did. And you are telling me this from my porch? At 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This won't be your porch once I tell the leasing office." "Oh no. That is a very serious threat for my dogs and my family, isn't it?" "Duck, yes it is." I give him a huge smile and turn off my recorder from my phone. The neighbor is confused now and I ask him to have a seat. I have a few things to show him. I pull out my papers and hand him the first one. It was the county's noise ordinance laws. In our county, a dog's bark was considered the same amount of sound as a loud appliance, so they can bark between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Before he could talk, I pull out another paper. This one states that it is against the leasing terms to threaten another neighbor, and after one warning that the apartment complex had the right to revoke their lease. He looks at me with an understanding of what he had done now. I silence him and pull out one last paper. This one was another leasing term I had found. This face after reading this one had made him turn white. This last one talked about how it was a complete violation of leasing terms to go onto another renter's property and threaten them or their property. This includes the renter's outdoor area. Those found guilty of this violation will have their lease revoked immediately and be forced to leave the apartment within a set time. The scared look on his face was priceless as I silently got up and walked back into my apartment. After he finally left, I called my leasing office and explained what had just happened and agreed to email the recording to them right away. A week later my mum came home with some news that she had learned from the leasing office. The man had been evicted from his apartment and would be leaving later that week. I found out that my actions had caused the other dog owners of the building to come forward and admit what he had been doing to all of them. After that there was never another complaint and I threw away the lemon spray collar. My mum still gets anxiety attacks once in a while, but has been getting help to ease those worries. As for me, I don't regret what I did, I just feel bad that it had to come to this. Thanks for listening.